ISIS poses a threat to Iraq and the surrounding region, and that is an understatement. As President Obama and his advisors consider options to combat the threat, conservative members of Congress, or I should say Republican members of Congress, and their pundit cheerleaders are more interested in playing their favorite game, blame Obama. Doesn't matter what it is, it's his fault. People's lives were in jeopardy. Our military, special forces, FBI captured someone who was the ringleader of the Libya Benghazi attack. They have criticized the president for bringing this man to justice. Now, yesterday, I listened with dismay when the Republican leader suggested and claimed that President Obama prematurely withdrew troops from Iraq. Think about that for a minute, Mr. President. 5,500 dead Americans, tens of thousands wounded, thousands and thousands of them wounded grievously. I asked my friend and Republicans that he leads, would they have preferred the U.S. stay in Iraq? Would preferred that our soldiers stayed in Iraq in harm's way? What has been taking place in Iraq is a civil war. Do the Republicans and their leader believe that servicemen and women from Kentucky and other 49 states across this great country should be inserted in the middle of their civil war? I don't think so. Fighting between sectarian factions in Iraq cost thousands of Iraqi and American lives over the last decade. And it's spawned a new breed of terrorism now. Yet the original architects of the war, of the invasion of Iraq, would have us believe that this is all President Obama's fault. Mr. President, think about that. Is there anything that could be further from the truth? I don't think so. This is an Iraqi civil war, and it's time for the Iraqis to resolve it themselves. Those who attack President Obama for bringing our troops home from Iraq are wrong and out of step with the American people. After a decade of war, the American people have had enough. American families have had enough. I do not support in any way putting our men and women in the midst of this civil war in Iraq. It is not in the national security interest of our country. It's not worth the blood of American soldiers. This morning there was an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal. Now, who would write that? How about Dick Cheney? Just to remind everyone, former Vice President of the United States, who clearly was the chief architect of the war. Mr. President, if there's one thing that this country does not need, it's that we should be taking advice from Dick Cheney on wars. Being on the wrong side of Dick Cheney is to be on the right side of history. To the architects of the Iraq War, who are now so eager to offer their expert analysis, I say, Mr. President, thanks, but no thanks. Unfortunately, we've already tried it your way, and it was the biggest foreign policy blunder in the history of the country. Now, people come back and say, they can give me some examples that have been worse, and I'll listen. But for me, know a little bit about history. This was a foreign policy blunder that would be hard to take away from being the #1 foreign policy blunder in the history of the country. President Obama and his military advisors are considering their options to address ISIS. But putting combat troops back in Iraq isn't one of them. I have no doubt that President Obama and America will meet this threat head on without the advice of Wolfowitz, Cheney, Crystal, the architects of the invasion of Iraq.